Walk down and have to be on that side. Water underneath once in a while something moves that I can't really spot what it is. It must be done. Yeah, it is. I feel like you're back in the days of King Elizabeth I. And they got the glass windows so they could make it look authentic.
Everybody here? Right, ladies and gentlemen, a big welcome to you all, a very special welcome to you all to Otley Hall, the home of Mr. and Mrs. Hagger. Mr. Hagger you have just met. I wanted to do the welcome here because we are literally at the original back of the house, and I think by the time I take you to the original front, the history is going to slot more into place. I mean, if you take a good look at the house, you can see where, for example, the chimney stack has been added to the house. Those wonderful towering chimneys. And actually, whilst I've got you here, can you notice either the W or the V?
Oh, yeah, I see that.
Halfway up the chimney. Yes.
Right here. You see the dark brick at the W.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what they're talking about.
Now, for a long time, we thought the W or the VV related to the Wingfield connection. Yes. But one of the experts on the subject has recently said that it's probably VV, representing Virgin of Virgins, Elizabeth I. But, you know, it's more like it, particularly when you can see the very old brick at the bottom of the chimney stack, you know, the 15th century brickwork. But then a little bit higher, it is a slightly later brickwork. But those wonderful towering chimneys, we like to say that a new stairs turret for the spiral staircase to lead up to the solar. Regrettably, the staircase was only taken out at the turn of this century by a Mrs. Shurston, who purchased the hall in 1910 and employed the services of a leading Edwardian architect, Morla Hawley, to help her restore the hall. Why they took the staircase out, I will never know. It's a great shame, isn't it? Now, for those who have been here before, you are perhaps told that the original manor house, Nether Hall, was the Podgeted building, which is now our kitchen wing. I'm afraid this information is wrong. Since the Haggers have been here, they have dug around, they have researched, and quite honestly, I am finding out something different practically every day. And in fact, when you arrived just now, I was heads down with Nicholas in the office. He was showing me the results of some recent geophysical surveys. And it is so interesting. It would appear that the house comprised more or less a square with a courtyard in the middle. So you must come again in a year's time.
3 years.
You think it's going to take... Well,
Every 3 years.
Quite honestly, the rate that Mr. Hagger is working, you know, it's wonderful. And I must confess that we are very lucky that the hall has landed up in the hands of Mr. and Mrs. Hagger, because they are so determined to cross all the T's and dot the I's and getting all precise information. Anyway, Anyway, now that you have seen the back of the house, let me take you to the original front. And if we may congregate in a little huddle like this, it makes it so much easier.
Thank you.
Please follow me. That's my Edward Mariah.
Just don't get too close to her.
Which is the...
No, I don't know.
Male usually gets bigger than female.
That's the male.
So that's Edward.
That is Edward.
That's Edward.
Edward Mariah and Elizabeth. So we are now at the original front of the building. And what you see today is an example of 15th and 16th century work. The 15th century building, the north wall, it comprised the hall, Great Hall, and two crossed wings. The east crossed wing comprising the parlour and solar above, and the west wing, which was lost after 1700. It fell into disrepair. Now, the exciting part this morning has suggested that perhaps the west wing was indeed one of the oldest parts of the building. So that would explain for the dilapidation and slipping into the moat, which was probably over the croquet lawn. And as well as this wing here, which was the former banqueting room, the building extended just a little bit further. There was another north wing, meeting up with an extended west wing. Therefore, a courtyard in the middle. Or a courtyard, or perhaps something more. The surveys have revealed this black area here, but of course the cameras could not go under that brickwork there. So it seems as if the haggers have got to dig this all up. Oh my gosh! Yes.
What's that?
So, today, Otley Hall, which is a Grade 1 listed building, described by Pevsner as one of the loveliest houses in England. Small of course.
It is.
Otley Hall stands within just 10 acres of ground now, comprising, and this is the exciting part, since the haggers have been here, they are keen to create all the Tudor features. And they have been here just over 2 years, and now at the bottom we have a herber, which is a recreation of a 12th century garden. And of course, years ago, and I've only just learned this, because apparently all flowers were called herbs. You all knew that, didn't you? Oh dear.
I didn't.
You oh.
Good boy.
Good boy. Oh dear. Beside the herber, we have an orchard, a new orchard of 12 trees, 1 black mulberry, 2 pears and 9 apple, with wild flowers beneath. Now apparently the definition of an orchard, 12 trees. 12 trees. You've got to have 12 trees to call it an orchard. And then beside the orchard, we have a mount. Now, the earliest recorded mount is about 1366 in Durham Priory. Am I right, Mr. Wingfield?
I don't know.
But our mount was only created in 1988, i.e. the year after the hurricane, when we lost so many trees. So we decided to follow the garden plan of Francis Inigo Thomas when in 1915 he could foresee an H-shaped canal and a mount. So in 1988 we joined the two bottom ponds together, creating this H-shaped canal. The clay we dug between the ponds, we created the mount with the addition of the uprooted trees. So that's quite interesting. And when you sit at the top of the mount, you can obviously get a very good view of the village of Otley. From the mount, there is a rose and vine walkway with a brick parterre representing Cardinal Wolsey's ceiling at Hampton Court. This was completed only at the beginning of this year by a lady called Maggie Howarth. She is the leading pebble creator in this country. She has also created a knot, a Tudor knot, just outside the tea room, which you'll see, you've seen that already. Now, from the walkway, there is a Tudor knot garden, again created only last year by Sylvia Landsberg, the author of Medieval Gardens. She is a garden historian, and she has been working alongside Nicholas Hagger on this, and as well as creating the Tudor features, she has linked in Mr. Hagger's book called The Fire and the Stones, whereby he has covered 25 civilizations passing through 61 stages of history and religion. So around the central Tudor knot we have 25 herb gardens, which is interesting. And then back here, the Croton Lawn, the two summer houses which have been rethatched this year, and in the larger of the two summer houses, the initials N, A and H have been woven into the design, representing Nicholas and Anne Hagger. Also in the large summer house there is a 300-foot well, which presumably fed the moat, and particularly when the house was completely moated in its heyday in the 16th century. But before talking more about the house, let me just explain a little bit about Mr. and Mrs. Hagger, because I know that as well as history, our visitors here like to know a little bit about the people who are living here now. Now, Mr. Hagger is a philosopher, he is a cultural historian, he is an author. He has published numerous books, including Overlord, which is a 12-volume epic, the first in the English language since Milton's Paradise Lost of 1666. The Fire and the Stone I have already mentioned to you. This year he is bringing out a further 4 books, and I think one I will tell you about. It's going to be very controversial. It's called Tudor Prince, and it's about a prince waiting to inherit the throne. It is about the breakup of the UK and about industrialists who would like to see a world government within the next 20 years. So I think perhaps he's going to be shot down in flames, isn't he? I'm longing to read that particular book. So I think with Mr. Haggard being a philosopher, I think this may explain why he is so interested in Otley Hall, why he is asking so many questions, and why he really wasn't happy with the history he took over when he purchased Otley Hall in February 97. Would you believe that within 2 months of buying the place, he was open to the public at Easter? And I think we were very lucky, because anybody could have come along and purchased Otley Hall and closed its doors forever. So we are so fortunate that he is willing to obviously invest a lot of money into the building. And
that's just happened down the road at Wingfield Castle. We used to visit every 3 years, and it is closed.
what, Mr. Ian Chance?
No, Castle, not college.
Sorry, where is
The
it?
Wingfield
Castle, next to Wingfield College.
Oh,
Closed. We used to go and visit there.
that's dating back to about
Michael Linford Johnson.
1362.
Yeah.
Oh,
The Canadian bought it and he said, "How many people?"
So it's nice the system.
you must be shattered.
Well, we're waiting for him to sell it.
We have to go and look through the bushes.
Or die.
die.
Yeah, we're
I think-
anticipating his
I
demise
think
one of these days.
that's most unkind. And quite honestly, the public is so appreciative. We find all the visitors who come here, they accept that it's a private house, and they treat it as such. Oh dear. So then, in its peak and splendour, 16th century, the house was completely moated. Let me take you back now to a little bit of history. Netherhall Manor, which later became Otley Hall. Now, of course, Netherhall means lower. Whether it means lower in status or lower in region, I'm not sure, because we are certainly on about the same level as the church. But in saying that, there was another hall here at Otley called Overhall, and it was probably Overhall and Netherhall detailed in the Domesday Book. Now, ownership of Netherhall can be traced back to the days of Adam de Otley in the 12th century, and that's the reign of Richard I. It's a long way back, isn't it? And I'm beginning to think that Adam de Otley obviously had his front room somewhere over there. But more will be revealed. By the 14th century, Netherhall was owned by the Cressiner family. Can you all hear me all right? Now, we were under the impression that the Gosnold family bought Netherhall from William Cressiner in 1454. Wrong. After 20 years, this is not now the case. We have found evidence that a Gosnold was renting in 1401. So the gentleman we always call John I, who came to Otley from Clopton Rouse Hall, was not indeed that one, and we are carrying out research now because the Gosnold family did have their seat at Clopton Rouse Hall in the 14th, 15th centuries.
How far is that? Just
It
here?
is just the next village. Nothing to
through
be
Clopton?
seen. No, I live in Clopton, and Rouse Hall now is just a very small estate of houses built in the, I don't know, 50s. There is absolutely nothing to see.
Right.
Quite honestly, I have already suggested to Mr. Hagger that his researcher ought to go back to Rouse Hall, back to the records office and investigate Rouse Hall, because we might find out more that way. Nicholas Hagger has been researching Brunsborough and Swilland, bearing in mind that Anthony Bartholomew probably came from Brunsborough. I favour Brunsborough, by the way. I heard your conversation with him.
Those are the two just mentioned who sailed with Admiral Wingfield.
Yes, I'll come back to that one, because I think I'm going to have an uncomfortable voyage today. Now, a Gosnold was renting here in 1401. Now, the strange part about it is, and there is documentary evidence, the Gosnolds, i.e. Robert I, did not buy Netherhall Manor until 1542.
Oh.
Yeah. When they bought it for £288. There's a copy of the document in the Great Hall. Now, the question is, why were the Gosnolds tenants for so long? Why did tenants inject so much money by building or rebuilding this particular building? There must have been a hidden agenda, because today tenants do not spend money on the landlord's property. So we've still got a lot of information to find out there. I'm still a little bit uncomfortable. But for some reason, the Gosnold family around Otley in 1401, they spent a lot of money here rebuilding Netherhall, later to become Otley Hall. We know, and there is documentary evidence, that in 1475, when John I died, his son John II built himself a separate kitchen, the kitchen of our tea room today. And if you look at the building I am pointing to, if you look at the chimney, you'll see some 2-inch bricks. I mean, that's an old chimney. There are some very old timbers over there, possibly the survivors of maybe a dwelling place, bearing in mind there has been a dwelling place here for 900 years. So, when John II built himself a kitchen there, the Great Hall, you could not associate the Great Hall with cooking purposes, and hence the new fireplace was built with the outer back chimney. Cooking took place there, and if you imagine, the west wing would have comprised the buttery and the pantry, so very close to the servicing kitchen. Now, in the 15th century, and I will just walk across here, this was the original entrance to this great hall with parlour that end and the service area here. And can you see the spandrel here, this very old piece of wood with the initials R? I used to say G, meaning Gosnold. But Nicholas is investigating whether that could be a C. representing the Cressener family. Certainly, the woodwork has been dated by Oliver Rackham, a leading wood expert, as about 1380. And at that stage, of course, Otley Hall, or Netherhall Manor, was in the hands of the Cressener family. But of course, it was the Gosnold family responsible for the rebuilding. So, more to be revealed. So this was the original entrance into the cross passage we will see when we go inside, with the Great Hall to your left, service wing to your right. Whilst we're nice and close, just look at the decorations here on the timber stops, the little coronets. And then, of course, this area here was extended. The parlour was pushed out in 1485. And if you look a little further along beyond the parlour, you'll see that this particular wing stood alone. You can note the modern brickwork here, and from the inside there is evidence to support that through there was an outer wall. So this building here sort of slipped just behind the Tudor building. But what was here before? We always thought this was the 16th century wing, with banqueting room above. And this is where the Wingfield connection will come in.
May I just ask a question?
Yes.
This is Netherhall. Where is the other one? Overhall, was it?
Overhauled by the church.
It is identified. It
Yes.
couldn't be your missing building.
No. A good question, but Overhaul, it would be feasible for the hall to be beside the church, yes? Interestingly though, there is a motte a few hundred yards south of the church. The locals will say that's a burial ground. Again, we've got to do research on that, because we want to find out where all these Gosnolds were buried. I don't know, do you know where Ursula was buried? Was she taken home to Letheringham or Alderton? Or perhaps she's here at Otley. But if so, the graves are now unmarked.
We may have the answer on the bus.
Oh, good.
We've actually got the Wingfield families ready. The visitation is on the bus, and I think you could look it up. Will you remind me as we get on?
Yes, I will, yes. Now, note the podgeting and the vine trail just above the jettied area, a sign of life and growth. According to Farah, he believes in old Suffolk houses that this building could have been 1525. We know the banqueting room above existed in 1559 when Ursula Naunton married Robert Gosnold III. Now, of course, Ursula's ancestors were the De Veres and the Wingfields. Note also that the building is supported on wonderfully turned columns. But if you look at the post to your right, that is very, very old. And I think this building has a lot to tell. Anyway, I think you might be getting a little bit chilly. Shall we go inside the house now and continue there? Please follow me. Interestingly enough, I've seen photographs of this facade.
Sorry, are we
completely
going in this
plastered.
door rather than the
No,
front?
no,
Before they won't
the front.
It is the front door. This front door.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, little monkeys carved in on either side.
Right.
Like croaky?
Right.
Properties go out in the mail line, and that Gosnell was daughter married into.
The chart depicts the Gosnell family. They lived here for just on 3
Yeah.
I'll come back to that.
It's
one.
somewhere here.
Is the G-O-S-N-O-L-D spelling the same family as the N-O-L-L, or are they two different
Over the
lines?
years, no. The names did change, sorry, the spelling changed. We refer to Gosnell, N-E-L-L, Gosnold, O-L-L, Gosnold, O-L-D. It's the same family.
Because both my husband and I come down from the Gosnells. I come through the Wingfield group.
Right, yes, yes.
And his comes through the sister of Elizabeth.
There was an Elizabeth Barrett who was the organizer in America. She has since died, and I don't know who has taken over now.
We took the address out of the book of American or International Family Societies. But 6,000. Nice. And we wrote that across the
Yes.
so we found ways of running. Ray is a great lady. Joined us in 2007.
It's a great talking point, isn't it? There's so much to discuss. I think as we have walked past the Gosnell chart, I will mention about the Wingfield and the Gosnell connection now. Now, I'm sure a lot of you may correct me, but to the best of my knowledge, the very first connection occurred with our John the Third, who was MP for Ipswich. He was a Solicitor General. He was Lord of the Manor of nearby Shrubland Old Hall. Now, to the best of my knowledge, his second wife was a daughter, and I don't know which daughter, of, again, Anthony Wingfield of Weatheringset Priory.
Never heard of the Weatheringset Priory one, very interesting. Or Letheringham Priory, probably
No.
is the writing.
Weatheringset Priory.
Does that mean he was a priest or?
I think you'll find that's a transliteration
Of Leathering.
Well, of course, Leathering or Weathering?
No, my information was Weatheringset Priory.
You mean
The-
Richard Hacklett's place up here?
That's right,
Oh, right.
yes.
Okay. Well,
Now, I
where's that?
do not know which daughter.
What date was that?
He was MP for Ipswich 1553,
Right.
and the Wingfield connection was the second marriage.
Right.
Now, John the Third, he was actually against the succession of Lady Jane Grey, but ways were found to win him over. Fortunately for him, he died, otherwise he would have been executed. So that is the first connection I am aware of with the Wingfield family. The second connection is through Robert Gosnold III, Robert the Justice, whose portrait is in the linen-fold dining room, or indeed the parlour. Robert was secretary to the Earl of Essex, and he was also master of requests to the Earl of Essex. And Robert III married into the Naunton family. He married Ursula Naunton, daughter of William Naunton of Alderton, I've seen it detailed as, yes. And Elizabeth's mother was Elizabeth Wingfield.
Born to be.
Yes, yes. So that's the connection with the Gosnold family.
We've just come from Letheringham, and of course Letheringham Abbey was the Wingfield Gosnold great house, which was only pulled down in living memory.
Oh dear, what a shame.
Right next to the church.
Yes. So you believe Anthony lived there, do you? As opposed to Wetheringset?
No, I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
It's again, I think I've got it in the bus in the file that's travelling around. I should brought it
All
out.
right. Well, what about Humphrey Wingfield then? Where did he live?
He lived at Ipswich and Great Yarmouth and London, because you speak of the House of Commons.
Yes, because he has so many connections with Cardinal Wolsey, doesn't
Yes,
he?
Yes, including Ipswich particularly. And he had a great house in Ipswich, which became the Tackett Inn, and it was pulled down in the other day, and all the carvings were taken to the Christchurch Museum.
Good.
Well, I say 1952.
Yes. So,
John Blatchley, or the headmaster of Huntington, he's
Ipswich,
the expert, Ipswich.
Ipswich School, yes. Yes, Mr. Hagger has met him, in fact, yes. Intriguing. So, yes, with the Cardinal Wolsey connection, of course, and Humphrey Wingfield, it's another story, which I'll mention in the parlour. So, the Great Hall. This is an example of what we call a single-storey Great Hall. Originally, it could have been open to the roof, of course with central hearth, before indeed the fireplace was added. But of course we've got to dig down in order to get evidence. But one of the timber experts, Oliver Rackham, he has found some blackening on the upper storey roofs. Now, when you study the architecture in here, okay, jettying was a way of forming another story, but I find it a little bit hard to see how a builder could actually install such a great hall, unless, of course, it was more or less gutted. And then we had this example in the late 15th century. But just look at the wonderful ceiling joists and the mouldings. And, you know, the whole volume of the room. The floor would have been quite a few inches lower, because this is an 18th century floor. But in the cross passage, digging down, you will see examples of some smaller brickwork. So the whole room was enormous, but very much darker, because the cross passage was panelled. There are slots where the panelling was. There was no west window because that's where the service wing was. Perhaps before the addition of the stair turret, there could have been a window in this back wall. Now, one interesting part is this new division in the fireplace. It's been confirmed that this is one of the panelling from the cross passage, complete with a spiritual sign representing the universe with planets. And of course it was usual for the design to appear cross-passage side as opposed to the Great Hall. When you look carefully, and I think this is the easiest place to see, the design of the fleur-de-lis throughout the house, which is a very early ecclesiastical design. Remembering that this was a Catholic household until the death of John II in 1475. God, isn't it incredible, you know, the age? Now, Mrs. Shurston, who bought the hall in 1910 or thereabouts, she was responsible for removing the panelling. I've seen a Country Life article showing the panelling, so regrettably Mrs. Shurston decided to take that out. But you'll see the timbers are indeed very old. Likewise, the panelling over the fireplace, that's 15th century panelling, and as such, the oldest panelling within Otley Hall. When you look very close at the panelling, which would have been in front of this spiral staircase, that's been added at a much later date. You can see all the joins. Ah, sorry, the indenture has been covered. Excuse me. Here is a very interesting document. You'll remember that I said that Otley Hall, as it was to become, was the seat of the Gosnold family for practically 300 years. And regrettably they were fighting on the wrong side. Therefore they lost their fortunes. I mean, they were very, very wealthy people. They married into the East Anglian nobility, okay, the Wingfields, the De Veres, the Talmash, the Bacon family, the Winthrops, I believe Massachusetts, and yes, the connection there. So the wealth. But in 1666, when Colonel Robert Gosnold was imprisoned in King's Lynn Jail, the estates were sequestrated, and Robert VII found it necessary to mortgage Otley Hall to Essex landowners. Anthony Dean, who was an Essex MP, and to Sarah Glover. It's a great shame. And of course there are, well, hundreds of Gosnolds around today. I think we have some here today. And they are represented in Ireland, America, the UK. But originally, the Gosnolds have been located in Kent. It's an Anglo-Saxon name, apparently. Different spellings throughout the generations, or perhaps the lines. For example, the line here, the seat, the Gosnolds were known as OLDS. The Bentley line, Thomas Gosnold, brother of Robert III, who married your Ursula, he was known as Gosnell, Gosnell. Isn't it strange?
Is the Bentley just down the road, that Bentley?
Bentley Hall, that's correct, near Ipswich. It was the former seat of the Talmash family. going back to about the 14th century, even before that, because I believe when the Normans came to England in 1066, the Tolmash family were based at Bentley Hall.
We were just saying that Sir Walter Raleigh spelled his name 7 times in one document of 3 pages in seven different ways, and there are 120 something minimum spellings of Wingfield in the records.
Now, you would think the name Wingfield would be quite easy to spell, don't you think? So how else did they spell Wingfield?
Do you want me to run through the 120?
Please don't ask.
I suppose W-Y. W-Y?
Lots of Y's and
Yes.
different arrangements of I-E and E after various consonants. Yeah.
So how difficult when doing your family?
But the Gosnells south of Shropshire, in the senior line of Robert E. Lee country, and it's exactly the same place, it's about 1 mile apart. They spelt it Gosnell only, as you know, down there. Alverley, just south of Shropshire.
Yes.
Of Shrewsbury.
Yes. In fact, I think I have met a couple of Gosnells from that line, Gosnell, because Mrs. Lance, that's her married name, she was telling me some 10 years ago that she thought there was a German connection, and in fact her husband, who was Bartholomew, he was going to research this, but I've since been told that it's an Anglo-Saxon name. Must worry about the time. Whilst I have you all together, and it's going to be difficult to talk to you when we're upstairs, dare I approach the subject of perhaps the most famous Gosnold of all time?
Please.
Bartholomew.
You may dare.
May I? Bartholomew. I think perhaps I shall be fortunate to get through my story about the first voyage in 1602-1603, when Bartholomew sailed to the New World by the northern route, when his ship, the Concorde, came across land which he chartered and named Cape Cod. I think I'm safe on this one.
You're all right,
Yes.
there's nobody
Yes.
here from Massachusetts.
Yes. And where the first English house was built in Cuttyhunk, and where he chartered and named Elizabeth's Isle after his daughter Elizabeth, who had died in infancy. So, you know, on that particular voyage, you know, may I safely say that Bartholomew helped to found the America of today, as we know, the Clinton and Kennedy's America. But seriously, Bartholomew returned from that particular voyage, which incidentally the Earl of Essex was hoping to fund, but of course by then, in 1601, he was in jail because the Essex rebellion had actually failed. And for Robert III's part in the rebellion, he was fined £40. Bartholomew's wife's cousin, who was a Smythe, a financier in London, he provided some 1,000 men for the rebellion. He too was jailed.
We've
He
just
was
been to
placed in
Kimbolton
town.
Castle, where the owner, Sir Edward Wingfield, who was also in the 1599 revolt, was banished to Ireland, and Sir John Popham, Lord Chief Justice, went to live in his castle, Kimbolton Castle.
Do you know, I wish you could stay here a week. I really do. You know, there's so much information to exchange.
Give me your email number and we'll go ahead.
Now, Bartholomew, he returned to England with a cargo of sassafras, which was a stimulant in those days. He reported favourably on the New World, and we would hope that he came back here to the Great Hall at Otley and commenced discussions regarding the next voyage which he wished to take, but this time to travel south.
But this to visit his uncle here.
His uncle here, that's right, uncle and aunt, Ursula,
Yeah.
Ursula, of course. Now, the Earl of Southampton, who was Shakespeare's patron, this is the third Earl, he favoured the voyage, and we believe he funded part of the voyage. But by then, the 1st Virginian Company was formed, and again, Bartholomew's cousin Thomas Smythe was involved in this. But later on, through negotiations, it was about a year before the voyage commenced in 1606, 1607. This is where Edward Maria Wingfield joined discussions, and he said that he wanted to be a stockholder in the 1st Virginian Company. I'm getting the nod of approval, yes?
Yes.
So, only about a year before the voyage, Edward became involved. Now, Bartholomew was appointed Vice Admiral of the voyage. Christopher Newport was appointed Admiral. Christopher Newport captained the Susan Constant, which was the larger of the 3 vessels which went to America. Gosnold captained the Godspeed, and John Ratcliffe the Discovery. By the time the 3 ships left England, I think there was perhaps a mutiny on board, a lot of disruption, and as a result, 3 men, and I think it was Stephen Colthorpe, and 2 others were placed in chains, including John Smith, whom I believe, particularly the Americans, judge might be the true founder of America. John Smith played a very large part, apparently, John Smith of Pocahontas fame. But anyway, he was in chains for most of the journey. But on arrival in Jamestown, Virginia, I should explain that they charted the James River, and they established the first English settlement in Jamestown, Virginia, and they succeeded where Raleigh had failed, and I think Raleigh was in the Tower of London when he heard of the successes of Gosnold and of Wingfield. But on arrival in Jamestown, Virginia, this charter, which had been given to presumably Christopher Newport to open on arrival in America, it stated that members of the council should include Bartholomew, Edward Maria, John Smith, Ratcliffe, and others. And much to Bartholomew's disappointment, bearing in mind that he got the momentum going from his first voyage, Edward Maria was voted as President of the Council and Governor of Virginia. So I think between us we have quite a story to tell. And it's always a very favourite story with all visitors here. But sadly, Bartholomew died within 3 months of arriving, probably of swamp fever, although I believe the archaeologist in Jamestown, Yorktown now, is saying, was there foul play? Bearing in mind that the skeleton of Colthorpe has been discovered with bullet wound in his knee. But I suppose we'll find out more as time comes along. Keeping my eye on the clock. But you obviously know all about the proposed
We know that
200.
story and
Okay.
would query which is what it says in the records. But
Really?
because William Kelso's trying to fit it into a framework of politics, Calthorpe makes a better story, but it still isn't proved.
Are you all involved in the 2007 celebrations?
Well, I've
So-
just been asked to speak at them, but it's
So you know all about that, what's coming up in...
not fully, no.
To commemorate the 400th anniversary of the founding of America, we're hoping to have celebrations in Martha's Vineyard, Jamestown and Ipswich, incorporating Otley Hall, of course. Apparently, schools in Virginia have already embarked on a project, and a director was appointed in 1997 to spearhead this whole celebration. No? We're hoping it's going to extend to all the states in America. But of course, Ipswich will be very much involved, likewise Mr. Hagger. And we're hoping that Ipswich will go ahead with a maritime museum, of course featuring Bartholomew and... I mean, East Anglia was such an important area with all these famous families. Anyway, let's go through to the parlour because I'm very conscious of Otley Hall with solar above. If you look very closely, you'll see that the floor joist mouldings differ from those in the Great Hall. Quite honestly, if they were the same age, the pattern would be the same. The floor joist at the end, at the top, quite honestly, that's a very, very old beam. Now, this room was originally unpanelled and unheated. And this is the outer wall I was referring to outside, where the banqueting room just slips behind it. Now, the panelling was introduced at a later stage. The panelling where James I is sitting, just one section here, you can see the join. That is indeed very, very old, and a date of 1485 has been given to me as the date of the wood. Perhaps wood from Lithuania or from Poland. Remembering, of course, a lot of reciprocal trading took place here in East Anglia. Wood in exchange for wool. But note this wonderful folded linen with tiny little stitch marks below. And when you look carefully, you'll see that the panelling depicts other professions and arts. For example, that a little flute. Can you see? Very much. And Humphrey Wingfield was there. I don't think Cardinal Wolsey was there, was he? But we've had the curator from Hampton Court here, And he was saying that the panelling here is far superior to that scene in Wolsey's closet at Hampton Court. So the mind is boggling at this moment. As part of his severance deal, you know, we're wondering whether Wolsey picked up his panelling, tucked it under his arm, brought it to Otley, remembering that part of his severance deal in 1528, he was given King Henry VIII's land in Otley. And that could be when he met, it would have been Robert I, this gentleman's grandfather, and indeed Wolsey. I mean, a lot of information still to find out. But in order to quicken the tour, this is the gentleman, Robert III, Robert Gosnell III, who married your ancestor Ursula Naunton of the Wingfield and De Vere family. This is just a copy. The original is in Christchurch Mansion. The other gentleman on the wall is Robert V, grandson of Robert III, and he married Anne Tolmash, who moved from Bentley, we were talking about, to Helmingham Hall. 10 minutes, yes, thank you. Shall we go upstairs now?
Yes.
We can continue the...
Do start the tour.
May I start? Right, and very quickly, we are now in the building supported by the turned columns with the pargeting and the grapevine, yes?
Yes.
Right, now this formed a 40-foot gallery which encompassed the staircase. The staircase was cut in at a later date because that is Jacobean. Now this is the gallery in which Robert III and Ursula Naunton, the Wingfield, celebrated their marriage. And the whole room would have been decorated with the wall paintings. Sadly, with only 2 small sections remaining, this and a part over the entrance door, which we'll see as we go through the door. But you'll see the crest of the Gosnold family on the left, and that of the Naunton family on the right. Do you recognise? Yes. And if you look carefully to the right, can you see the little green man is depicted? Although some people are saying it may not be the green man, it might be the man of the woods, hence in Shakespeare plays, etc., bearing in mind that plays were performed in private houses from 1586 or 76, I believe, and of course public playhouses closed with the Civil War. But I favour the green man, yes, because that would make the dating right. So the marriage took place in 1559. The area was divided at a later date, and when the Gosnolds became lords of the manor, because they did not become lords of the manor until they actually purchased the hall in 1542, this became a courtroom and indeed a manorial schoolroom, and it was here that Bartholomew undertook some of his education, and this is according to the American Gookin. I think he conducted a 40-year research into the subject of the Gosnold family. Okay,
Can we get the rug?
Yeah.
Pleasant.
One in the other room, the guy was halfway through it. Dad looked at it and he says, "You gotta fix that." He says, "Oh, but we've already got it down." He says, "Well, the good thing I stopped it before you finished it, isn't it?" The guy hadn't even finished the thing.
But this is a very nice room, and you'll see your ancestor, the 17th Earl of Oxford, sitting along here. And you'll see Castle Hedingham, which was the home of Lord Burleigh. Of course, the 17th Earl married the daughter of Lord Burleigh, and of course the son was the Cecils. He became very powerful. He persuaded James VI of Scotland to come down to England.
And William Cecil's sister, Mary Wingfield, who was there.
See, I like this. I wish you could stay longer because I could only just touch.
Now I'm going to whisk him away.
Yes, yes. Let's go downstairs and over to the tea room.